This shall be our new home for the next mini-moons. Okay, now I just need to... Guys, could you help me out here? Okay. Guys, I'll call Captain Morgan.
The reckoning has finally begun.
And so begins my education of true villainy. All hail the antagonist? Hello, antagonist!
Oh, it's you again. I forgot I put you on distraction duties.
Wait, you perceive my reviews as a mere distraction? I mean, I know you got your own thing going on, but...
Keep up the good work while I take care of the important part of the plan.
So, what exactly is going to be my study material then, for the first episode?
I'm afraid I'm quite busy. You'll have to get the assignment from the recreational automaton slave.
What? I didn't understand any of that.
I think he's referring to me.
Oh, you. Alright then, you give it to me.
I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to tackle the villainy of an iconic franchise that humbly began in the 1970s against all odds, but became an unexpected phenomenon. But after hitting a low point in the 90s and another attempt in the 2000s, the franchise has made another return to the big screen at the end of last year with a 7th installment.
I've got a good guess as to what your choice is. Way ahead of you.
Rocky!
Ah yes, Rocky. Before I ever took a crack at this one, it always perplexed me how no other movie about sports had this big of a geeky following to it.
What about Space Jam?
Nah, I'm not perplexed with that one. It has Looney Tunes in it.
The Rocky films are about boxing. No fantasy, no horror, no sci-fi, no espionage, no cartoons, just boxing. And yet it's commonly talked about amongst the geeky community. Okay, maybe there's just a little bit of sci-fi. And so for the preparation of this video, I binge-watched the films on Netflix right before the great Rocky Purge of 2016. At first, my theory was that the lineup of villains was to thank for the geeky fan base. Each one of them has their distinctive traits and motivation. I mean, the most common way to identify each movie is by who the villain was. But after the binge, I realized that it's also the perspective on boxing that makes it geeky. At first, the protagonist just sees boxing as a necessary evil, because it's the only job he's good at. But almost everyone else in this universe views boxing as a gladiator-level sport full of legends such as the heroes and the villains. That's why I noticed so much emphasis on the opponents before even seeing the films. But if we're looking at this lineup as a mythological pantheon, then we're bound to see a few heroes in there too as well, not just Rocky and Adonis. So let us sort through all of this and string out the true villains of the franchise. Spoiler alert! For the love of God! Spoiler alert! It all begins in the first Rocky film, where we enter a world where the most prominent of all boxers is heavyweight champ Apollo Creed. He starts off the film being more passionate about his image than his skills. He wants to be viewed as the personification of the American dream, a love child of Captain America and Uncle Sam. And with the bicentennial approaching, he puts his belt on the line for another glorious match. But when his opponent cancels, Apollo sees this as an opportunity for a presentation with a better hook. Instead of a fellow MVP, it should be an unknown randomly plucked from the city. Apollo wants this to be an underdog story to draw in crowds, and he chooses Rocky solely because of the sound of his nickname, the Italian Stallion. On the day of the fight, Apollo sees this as simply another opportunity to showcase his patriotism, but then realizes in the first round that Rocky is treating this like an actual boxing match, more than he is. When the final bell rings and the match is over, the judges announce who they declare the winner to be. The movie puts minimal focus on that because it does not matter who won the fight. As soon as Rocky accepted the challenge, the only thing that mattered to him was that he gave it all he had, to make it all the way to the end, which is what ultimately happens. It does not matter to Rocky that Apollo was declared the winner, and as shown in the second chapter, it never mattered to Apollo either. Apollo receives much ridicule for letting Rocky last as long as he did in the ring. Apollo has virtually no reason to be this fixated. Not only was he the winner, but he also still has all his fortune, while Rocky is in a worse place he was before the match. Apollo insists that it was a fluke, and it won't happen again in the rematch. There is an implication of this being about race, but I believe that it could be that Apollo is so used to winning to the point where it's no longer satisfying. Now he has to beat them in the first round. And with this situation, he sees a mistake he has to fix. But he was just giving Rocky the chance to win this time, thus taking Apollo's title as heavyweight champ. So now Rocky is the one who's on top. But that only means there shall be all kinds of challengers wanting to dethrone the new king. The third installment shows that with every victory Rocky has defending his title, an onlooker slowly gains more and more strength and desire to have the honors of taking down the stallion. This new opponent is Clubber Lang. But first, Rocky goes up against a different breed of fighter, a wrestler, for an exhibition match. Thunder Lips appears to want nothing more than to go full Bane on Rocky, refusing to hold back his explosive rage against Rocky. After almost starting a riot, it turns out that Thunder Lips just does it all for show. Now this could be seen as a statement on how pro boxing is more real than pro wrestling, but I think it's more to show two sides of a coin. You have the fighter who does all the threatening and name-calling for the sake of an act, but then you have the fighter who legitimately means every word of it. to the point where Clubber brings Rocky's personal life into the thick of it. And when Rocky loses the belt to Clubber, there is even a greater loss to mourn. No, I'm not talking about the Penguin coach. I'm talking about Apollo. But that's not till the fourth movie.
I'm not talking about when he died. I'm talking about when he switched over to the protagonist's side.
But there's a good reason why Apollo wants Rocky to take back the title. He saw something in Rocky that Rocky no longer had when he fought Clubber. Apollo is not going to let the man who beated him be bested by someone else so easily. Plus, Apollo has another reason to help Rocky. When the rematch ends with Clubber's downfall, we never see Clubber again. Likely because he was very much an irredeemable, one-note villain who never really earned a post-fight hug with Rocky. Though he did claim he never actually hated Rocky, he just
shows pity towards the fool.
But Rocky now has a debt to pay. Apollo wants one more match, this time in privacy, which shows that Apollo is no longer all about the showmanship. He's gone back to what matters most to him in boxing, which might have sealed his fate in the fourth installment.
Too bad I already gave that away a few minutes ago.
Apollo realizes that he boxes because some people were simply born to do one thing. For him and Rocky, their purpose is to be lifelong warriors, and to just quit fighting is basically to quit living. So Apollo takes on the challenge that was meant for Rocky. This decision winds up killing Apollo, but in the long run, that may have been what he wanted. To go out doing what he loved, instead of as a cooped-up retiree. So who did he die in the hands of, you ask? As with most film sagas, the tendency is to go bigger and badder with each installment. The first 3 films kept it inside of the American Boxing League, but the fourth cranked it up to international levels, injecting themes of the Cold War, with the entire country of Russia relying on one boxer to be their representative. Ivan Drago is the perfectionist type of athlete. All of his strength and stamina is measured precisely. He relies on the most state-of-the-art techniques that technology can offer, and it just so happens to be identical to the primitive training Rocky is having at the same exact time, all in one montage. So this time, the climactic boxing match is not about the heavyweight champion title. There's an emphasis on it being about the US and Russia being able to butt heads without it being a war. But I felt there was not enough emphasis on this being about the fact that Ivan is arguably Apollo's killer. Maybe Rocky forgave Ivan because he knew Apollo wanted to go out that way, but still, Ivan showed hardly any remorse. All the way up to the final exhibition in Russia, Ivan has had very little to say, and little is known about his personality. So without the humanization, it feels that Rocky is going up against a whole country instead of just one man. But in between rounds, Drago reminds his manager that he's not doing this for Russia anymore. Drago is doing this for himself. This shows Rocky that Drago is just a man, and he is able to overtake Drago. Then we insert an obligatory but insightful commentary on the current issues of 1985.
Well, who's to say the Rocky movies really weren't the cause of the end of Cold War? But if we want to settle our current problems with Russia, Then I think I know the perfect idea for a Creed sequel.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves again.
You're right. I should back up a bit to the 5th movie.
No, I changed my mind.
Yes, the notorious black sheep of the Rocky series. But should we really give old Tommy Gunn all this flack for just being the villain of the worst installment? No, it's because of the mullet! Perhaps Tommy Gunn is perceived as the weakest because he's not really meant to be the main bad guy this time. Just a naive pawn, as his name suggests. All the strings are being pulled by a boxing manager this time. George Washington Duke is a deviously conniving parody of real-life promoter Don King.
My interpretation was better. Only in America, 2 reviewers go in, 1 comes out, only in America.
Duke represents the corporate business side of boxing. He's concocted the perfect way to exploit Rocky's success by matching him up with a pre-selected boxer. He tempts the offer, especially when Rocky slips back into poverty. But instead, Rocky finds hope in a spry young newcomer who just wants to follow in his footsteps. Now, I might get lynched for this, but I actually find Tommy interesting. He's the only foe that personally knew Rocky before fighting against him, sort of making him like a reverse Apollo. You see all the trust and respect they have for each other, while knowing in the back of your head it's all gonna go south real bad. It's just a matter of time. And so the young Padawan is corrupted by the evil Lord Emperor Ducatine. Tommy is more swayed by the fame and fortune than Rocky was, so he rejects Rocky as manager in favor of Duke. The heavyweight championship is up for grabs now that Rocky retired, but when Tommy wins all of it, Duke insists that he'll only truly be on top when he takes down the former champ, Rocky. I guess Tommy empathizes with the moviegoers because he wants the movie to end as soon as possible, by skipping over the boxing ring and instead just fighting Rocky right where they were when he challenged him. The street.
I mean, it's a change of scenery.
So Rocky overcomes his medical condition using ghosts or something, and knocks out the dastardly duo. With each Rocky film came an opponent who was more outlandish than the last. First we had a showman, then we had a trash talker, then we had a living weapon, and now we have a James Bond villain with a henchman? Although it made these antagonists more memorable than the ones we got in the New Millennium era. So after a long break to self-reflect, it was time to go back to basics in the 6th installment. At this point, the heavyweight title has been passed on many times, and is currently in the hands of Mason the Line Dixon. Mason represents the modern controversies the sports industry frequently faces. Everyone accuses his matches of being fixed, so he becomes the very first opponent to fight Rocky reluctantly. Because of course, if his matches seemed way too easy before, the one with a senior veteran would be the easiest of them all, and would just be a waste of time to Mason. The public's interest in this pairing is the result of something that not only sports fans know all about, but so do movie, comic, and video game fans. The act of pitting 2 different iconic figures against each other in a simulated fight. The simulation leads both sides to agree on a real-life match, in spite of all the stigma. And so we go back to the theme of the winner not mattering. What matters now is that Rocky had one good fight left in him. And now that he's got it out of his system, he's earned the respect from Dixon, after previously believing Rocky was a has-been. But what truly brings this full circle is that the very first opponent we ever saw go up against Rocky on screen is currently working at Rocky's restaurant.
So this was the perfect place to end the story. But that reasoning has never stopped a franchise before.
What justifies the existence of a spin-off starring Apollo's son is the chance for a whole new motivation of the hero, which means a new counter-motivation of the antagonist. Adonis Creed is a natural-born fighter like his pop, but wants to make a name in boxing on his own, without using his dad's legacy as a crutch. He keeps his parentage a secret until someone slipped it out to the public. It's never specified who spilled the beans, but the main culprit is Pete Sporino, possibly out of jealousy over Rocky taking in Adonis instead of Sporino's son. But he's not the main antagonist here. Pretty Ricky Conlan uses this revelation as a weapon against Adonis. Apollo was known for his iconic matches against the underdog Rocky, so Ricky declares himself to be the new Rocky against the new Creed.
Ricky, Ricky.
Pointing out that he came from a rough life while Adonis came from a pampered one, thus giving Ricky the sympathy from the public. Ricky continues the theme of controversies that was started by Mason by trying to get in one last match before his sentence to prison, and Adonis has been chosen as his final match. But when Adonis manages to prove himself, he gains Ricky's respect, which puts Ricky in a category with Apollo and Dixon. This category is of opponents who are not necessarily villains. Rather, they are the heroes of their own stories that happen to intersect with Rocky and Adonis's stories. Even though they don't quite have the same morals as our protagonists, they still have enough to honor their opponent and be respectful. The other category is the category of irredeemable opponents. Definitely the villains of the stories. They include Clubber, Ivan Drago, and the Dastardly Duo. And so you have the heroes, the anti-heroes, and the villains. And when you put them all together, you have this glorious pantheon. And this is one that is on par with the ones for superheroes, video games, and anime, thus verifying this movie's geekiness.
But wait 1 minute. Wait a minute!
Whenever an anti-hero won the final fight of a movie, it never mattered who the winner was. But when the villain lost the final fight of a movie, it definitely mattered who the winner was.
That is a double standard if I've ever seen one! Oh well. Mr. Goodbot, let's rank the opponents of Rocky now. Number 6 being least villainous, and number 1 being the most villainous.
Mason Dixon, Apollo Creed, Pretty Ricky, Duke and Tommy Gun, Clubber Lang, Drago.
Okay, let's be fair now and take off the villain goggles and rate this objectively now.
Duke and Tommy Gun, Pretty Ricky, Mason Dixon, Clubber Lang, Drago, Apollo Creed,
Well, that was one down. Technically 2, but anyway, 5 more to go.
Hey, whatever happened to the robot in the 4th movie?
Do you think I would know that? Do you think all robots just know each other? How would you feel if I asked you what happened to the Cadbury Bunny?
I know exactly what happened to him! He died! Rabbits don't live that long, okay?
You voted for Good Plot? Congratulations. You get an X. You subscribe to his channel. You get an X. You interacted with him. Good. You just got yourself an X. I've got my eye on you now. You're tied with my henchmen, which means you might be of some use to me. So I'll do everything in my power to protect you from it.